And we're live! Welcome to the Not a Myth interview with Molly and Mar! Welcome to my channel. I know you've been here a lot.
Hello.
As if you've never been here, like we've
We've never done a live here ever.
That's crazy.
We're definitely not doing a live here in a few hours either.
No, definitely not. That'd be crazy. So, do you guys want to tell me about the book? I loved it, but I figure you guys know how to talk about it. Do you want to give me a summary?
Okay, so I'm the poet, Mars the artist. It is a concept piece that is a collection of poetry and illustrations that takes place in a fictional forest Mar and I created, and each poem and picture takes you further into the forest until you reach the center of the forest. And it is heavily inspired by our favorite stories, such as The Starless Sea, The Secret History, everything related to David Bowie, our web series Caravan of Lies, but there's also pieces that are original characters and original inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we really want to focus as well on other ways of storytelling and how this could be just an experience through music or through other sensations, right? And not just the illustrations and the textures and Molly's poems and all of that. I think the book is a door that opens up to this world and this experience, and that there's more than one way to experience this story and this
we wanted it to, obviously most poetry collections have a theme, and some poetry collections have some illustrations like Rupi Kaur, for example, or Amanda Lovelace, but we wanted it to be very much a narrative, not just like a theme. So the theme isn't just like, oh, we're in a forest, oh, it's cottagecore. There's a very specific order to the poems. Very much we were inspired by the way that Taylor Swift says that folklore and Evermore take place in a fictional universe that Taylor Swift refers to as the folklorian woods. So this is kind of like the Not a Myth woods. The poems and pictures can all stand on their own, but when you sit down and you read the piece together, it's its own kind of story. And it's not necessarily like a chronological story, because the idea is these things are all happening simultaneously in this woods. It's just you, the reader, are the main character going through like a choose your own adventure kind of story, but through poetry and illustration.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. So how did you guys come up with this idea? I know we've been talking and we've been talking about working on things for a while. So how did you guys talk about it? How did you come up with this specific book and what you were going to do with it?
Well, I was like, Mar, what if we did this? Because again, Rupi Kaur is currently the most successful living poet in the United States, and her debut collection, Milk and Honey, was little illustrations. She has kind of little sketches in her poetry collection. And I always really liked that idea. And back in the day, illustrations were much more common in books. Charles Dickens was always very set on having illustrations, as was Jane Austen. And so we don't just have occasional pictures. They're very much full illustrations that go exactly with all the poetry pieces. So the first night we worked on it, we just made a list of vibes. We were like, what do we want it to feel like? And we wrote down, obviously, our favorite book, The Starless Sea. And we wanted it to feel similar to that, but still its own thing. As Mar always says, it's a door. So we wanted it to feel very immersive. So we made a list of songs and just aesthetics, and we looked at a lot of pictures on Tumblr. There were so many nights we would just search door, or there was a night where Mar was looking at pictures of ants for one specific picture, and so we just tried to do as much research we could into each specific thing. We watched the David Bowie musical specifically so that we could really pinpoint specific scenes and lyrics. And we made a really long playlist on Apple Music of just very specific songs. And yeah, so we obviously it's cottagecore, but I'd like to think it's a little bit more than cottagecore. So what do you think, Mar?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really wanted to lean into the portal fantasy aspect and have the reader becoming the hero of this story as well. So they could just immerse into it and traverse the forest and meet the characters and meet its mythology or whatever, and just be aware, like, okay, you can stay here in this fantasy world that we invented. And like we focused a lot, on like tiny details and stuff like that that we really love, and that we thought it could like wake up like the interest and the love for this project in other people as well. So
one we really focused on is in the David Bowie musical Lazarus, which there's 2 pieces in here that are heavily influenced by that. And there's a set of dialogue the 2 main characters say, where one of them says, "Do you think we'll get lost among these stars?" And the other one says, "Seek some more and we'll travel on." And that was kind of the idea. Like, do you think we'll get lost in this forest? And it's like, if you keep reading, if you keep going, then you will, but that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. So then you guys started working on this. Did you always have the idea of like publishing it on Amazon? Like, how did that work out? How did you kind of come to that?
We were like, we'll do it independently, because I can't even begin to understand how we would pitch this. Poetry is, I went to school for poetry, and I've had independent poems like published in journals and magazines. Getting poetry books published, if you don't get picked up by one of the huge publishers like Andrews McNeil that published Rupi Kaur and Amanda Lovelace and like the Instagram poets, it's just the hardest place to get published in, because way less people read poetry than did back in like the Victorian era or something. Most poets like get they win like competitions, or they get positions like being a poet laureate, and they're given like a limited print run, or they're published through a university. It's just a very hard market, and a lot of poets who became really big, like Rupi Kaur, she self-published on Amazon. Where the poet Erin Anastasia, who I'm friends with, published her book Mapless on Amazon. And so it just seemed like the best route, especially since we weren't like just pitching a poetry book. You know, it's a fully illustrated poetry book. And I can't think of literally any other poetry book I've read that's full of full color illustrations. So
yeah, it's really cool how like they kind of balance each other out. They like kind of alternate between them, and you go on this journey with them together.
Our formatting editor, our friend Michelle, was like, "Are you gonna print them in black and white or color?" And we were like, "Color." I was like, "Mark did not spend all this time on the colors for us to do this in black and white."
Can you imagine? Just like, oh, sorry, Mara. I mean, like,
I know you spent hours on the colors, but we're gonna do black and white. So
yeah. Do you have any comments on the Amazon thing, and like how was it like to work on it, on everything? Because it's pretty cool. They send it, like they print it themselves and send it out. I thought it was just going to be a PDF online.
Yeah, no. Royalty rates on Amazon are actually way better than we suspected they were. What people don't seem to understand a lot of times outside of writing and publishing is writers actually make like only a few dollars from each book sale. So while we don't have like the advantage of a book advance like traditionally published authors do, we get a pretty big royalty, and then we don't pay for printing or shipping. But just the formalities of formatting a book, we learned the hard way. We should have just paid Michelle to do sooner. We were like, we can do it ourselves. No, we could not. We spent 6 hours trying. It did not work. And so we just enlisted Michelle to format it for us. We couldn't format the cover. We couldn't do anything. It was pathetic. We couldn't do it. So when we put out our second book, we already told Michelle, we were like, we're just going to.
Yeah.
We can't.
From the get-go, yeah. Nice. So like how long did it take you to work on this? I know you said you came up with the idea and you proposed it. So like when was that, and like how long did it kind of take you? Like were you speeding, or like what was happening? Like
We started in May, right?
We started like around April, May.
We started like the end of, because it was like the end of poetry month. It was like middle end of poetry month, which is April.
Oh, and you were doing a poem every day. Right?
Yeah, I was
supposed that was a good time.
I was writing a poem every day. On Tumblr and Instagram, I was posting a poem every day.
And then I feel like we had to rush things though. Like
felt really the formatting process of getting it up was like stressful and felt rushed because it was just like crunch time. But the writing the story, we would just meet up like on Zoom several nights a week for hours. Like and it never felt like we were doing it for hours. We'd be like, oh, we've been here for 5 hours doing this. Because it's like Mara was saying the other night that her friends would be like, how do you not burn out? And it's just like, we wanted to do it. We wanted to do this story. So it came pretty naturally. I know like some writers, like my favorite poet, her most recent book came out, Grocery List Poems by Miranda McGavin, and she was like, I spent 2 years on this book. And like, I don't understand that. But like, I guess for some writers, they spend years and years on a book, and other writers like romance writers and like Stephen King are just, here you go. And so it felt really natural.
Ice Planet Barbarian.
Ice Planet Barbarian. She'd be putting it out. But I mean, that's how it felt. It felt really easy not easy, but it came naturally to write it. Obviously, we had nights where we were like, why isn't this working? And we had like, there was one night where I was trying to write the poem, The Owl King, and it was so difficult. And Mar, were you like, was that the night you were looking up like wisteria and ants to draw the Hollow Sisters?
I think it was the ants. Yeah.
Pictures.
I don't know, like the moment you start drawing, the process is just like, I forget how everything looks like, so I need to check it out. Like
I remember you were like, one time Mara was drawing artwork I commissioned, and she was like, tell me why I forgot what a coconut looks like.
Yeah, I can imagine that must happen. So like, what was that process like with both like the writing and the art? I know you kind of talked about it to me like when we were on Zoom casually, but like, would you write a poem and then Mara would draw the art? Would Mara draw the art and you write a poem? Like, how did that work out? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I think it was very like balanced out. Like sometimes Molly will write something and I will do the drawing for that, or I will do the drawing and she will be like, okay, I can do a poem for that, or it's just we just like simultaneously will do it. Like for some poems, like we didn't even talk about it, and she will like later text me like, hey, I did this. I was like, oh, that's a coincidence because I did the drawing.
Yeah, the House of Hollow poem. There's 3 poems near the beginning called Fia Clan, Lively and Beautiful Beast that are inspired by the book House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. And I started reading the book and I was like, Mara, you would like this book. And then at the same time that Mara drew this picture of one of the characters and sent it to me, and I was like, that's like great for this. I could write a poem that goes with it. And then the next day I was like, I'm actually writing poems for all the sisters. And Mara was like, well, that's interesting because I'm drawing the other 2 sisters. The first night we worked on it, though, we sat down and we went through drawings and poems that we already had to see what would work. So like the poem Letter from the Widow at the Stone and Rabbit Holes Are Not Always Rabbit Holes, and Until I'm Sick of It. I'd written Rabbit Holes Are Not Always Rabbit Holes in like 2015. And it's such a short poem that I was like, well, what will I ever do with this? I can't submit this independently. It's like 6 lines. But I knew that that was it. It was meant to be that short. And like Mar had
I already had the Caravan of Lights drawing.
Caravan of Lights, some of the pictures. Like the picture of Mirabelle is modeled after a picture of me from last summer that Mara had already drawn. So first we matched all that up. We didn't like match it. We picked what we were like, we could work with this. And then we like the picture for Bittersweet. I was like, I'll figure out a poem for that. And vice versa. Then some of it, once we had the list, we were like, okay, it makes sense to have a piece for the character Marley from the Lazarus musical. And it makes sense to have a piece for this and a piece for this. And so it was this blend of like, one of us would draw something or write something and the other would match it, stuff that we already had, and then kind of just figure like together being like, this makes sense, this makes sense.
Yeah. That's fun. So did some of the art that you had prior like kind of line up and everything? Because I know you both love very similar things, so likely you have similar art tastes.
So like I made the drawings for Caravan of Lies, right? And we're like, yeah, what if we introduce them into the book as well and continue, like Molly can continue their stories, right? And write a little bit more background into them. And I don't know, I had some other works for another like poetry collection that I made just for like my uni and stuff like that. So it was like, oh, Molly was like, I like that one, and we just like picked it out. And I don't know, like even I just did some drafts and stuff like that and send them to her. I was like, okay, what do you think? And she was like, oh, I'll really like this one and this one. And then I will just like try to figure out if the others will work or not. And that's pretty much how.
Yeah, like the poem, my sister's favorite poem in the book is called Until I'm Sick of It. And I wrote that back when The Wicked King by Holly Black came out, the poem is inspired by The Wicked King, and it was originally a much longer poem that I made like a YouTube video for and everything. Over the years, I shortened it and I put it in like other poetry collections I kept submitting, and I was always trying to get that poem published in the form that it became, and no one wanted it. And so when we were picking poems, I was like, because it's inspired by a book about fairies, I was like, I really think this poem, Until I'm Sick of It, would work. And it's inspired by a line in The Wicked King where he says, kiss me until I'm sick of it. And so that worked. And then obviously, like, I always knew rabbit holes, or not always rabbit holes, should be in it, since one of our working titles was rabbit holes. Like, we were considering just calling it that. But we were like, it's more than that. I went to like Mara's art Instagram. I was like, every picture Mara had drawn the picture of me in Mirabelle cosplay from last summer. And then like on my birthday, Mara had drawn pictures of us in our Starless Sea cosplays from TikTok. And I was like, we got to put these in here. And then I remember Mara was like, which Caravan of Lies picture should we include? And I was like, all of them. Get it all in there. So yeah, it was like that, a very weird blend, not weird, but like an interesting blend of, that was the first thing we did, is go through things we already had. And since Mar and I have very identical tastes in stories, like I know Bridget, you and I are always like, this isn't for me, like something that one of us likes. Whereas
like, this is really cute, and you're like, no.
It's not interesting enough for me. The Starless Sea, you were like, I didn't get it. We're like, exactly, it's so weird and nothing makes sense.
There's too much to think about.
And so like, since we have such identical ideas and stories, and there'd be stories where we'd be like, oh, we'll never be able to fit like secret history stuff in here and Neil Gaiman stuff in here. And then we were like, actually, like one night I said, I wish we could, I was like, as a joke, was like, a poem about Neil Gaiman. And then I was like, that would never work. And then Mar sent me a voice memo that night and was like, actually. And Mar, like, can you explain it? You had like such a good idea of how we put Neil Gaiman in the book.
Yeah, like, so I started thinking, because there's a line in the Starless Sea that talks about like tarot cards and how they tell their own story, and like if you put them in the right order, it will tell you the whole truth. So I was thinking of that, and I was thinking like a Neil Gaiman that has like this kind of aura, and it's like, okay, it could be either the hermit, the magician, something like that. And it's like, okay, we can put him just like wandering around the woods, and you don't know if he has created some parts of this world, or if that's just a myth and he's just a hermit walking around, right? And it was like, okay, what if, like, we don't know what he has done here, what he has created. And I think it's also like kind of, I don't know, works like with the whole mythology concept of like, is it a god, is it just a spirit, what is the thing that inhabits the woods? And I think it also worked out perfectly with like the other characters, like even Isabella and stuff like that. They could match up like also tarot cards and stuff like that. And
yeah, I think the Caravan of Lies pictures and the Neil Gaiman picture very much look like tarot cards. Like I think Isabella's picture like really looks like that's a tarot card. And Neil Gaiman, like, he's our favorite author. We've read like almost everything the man has written, and we're always like rereading and talking about it. Like there's a line in one of the poems that references Coraline. And it's just, I mean, I always say I think he's the most brilliant living writer. Like I just, I just think he's a genius, and he crafts like every world he makes in each book is so unique. And
very nuanced and everything.
Yeah, like the world he makes in Neverwhere is literally nothing like the world in Stardust, or the ocean at the end of the lane is one of the, we had like just finished rereading The Ocean at the End of the Lane right before we wrote this. And we'd read Neverwhere like last year, and I had finished like reading Coraline, and he's just such a big impact in our lives. We always joke we don't want to read things by men that aren't Neil Gaiman. Like Mar was like saying, one of her friends was like, the only male author you read can't be Neil Gaiman. It was like, it could though, because he
and it is. Yeah.
And it is. Like my mom one time was like, how many like of your favorite books are by male authors that aren't Neil Gaiman? I was like, a bunch of dead men, like J.M. Barrie and Lewis Carroll.
Rick Riordan.
Rick Riordan. Yeah, I said Rick Riordan. That was he's the only other living man that I'll tolerate. So yeah, when Mara came up with that idea, I then wrote his poem as like he was a legend and he might have written the woods into existence. He might not have. He might have written some of it. He might have not. There's a line Neil Gaiman said in an interview once years ago about writing The Ocean at the End of the Lane, how he was sitting down and it was going to be a short story. And then he just kept writing it. And then he like wrote almost the whole thing in one night. And he called his agent the next day and said, he had told her he was taking a break. And then he called her and he said, "I'm terribly sorry, but I appear to have written a book." And so that line's in the poem. He'll say, "I'm terribly sorry, but it appears I've written a book." And so it's kind of like, oh, I'm terribly sorry I created this world. And the same thing, like Isabella in Caravan of Lies, like Isabella, even though Saren's like a mythical being, I'd say Isabella is like the next thing to like a very all-knowing person. So it made sense to have him be a kind of character in it. And then there's a Starless Sea character that has a poem called The Path That Leads to the End, but it's like, we can't tell you who narrates that poem because it gives away the ending of The Starless Sea. Like, you know who I'm talking about, Bridget, when you read the ones who say we're quite fond of you as well. So they're like one of our favorite characters from The Starless Sea, but we can never say who they are to people who haven't read it because then we'll like ruin that big reveal at the end. And I know that's one of Mar's current favorite poems, The Path That Leads to the End, which is told from their point of view. So
I was going to ask, do you have any personal favorites? I know, I think Clan or whatever was my favorite, and then I also really liked Our Tragedy and like the illustration that goes along with that.
Mine's The Owl King because it's the Labyrinth inspired poem, and it's about the Owl King, Jareth, David Bowie's character, obviously. It took me over a week to write it. It took the longest time. I rewrote it many times. I read like 2 entire books to get it right. I read like a comic series called Labyrinth Coronation. I read an out of print English fairy tale called The Owl King because I really wanted to understand. They reference the Owl King in The Starless Sea, and Mara and I were like, well, that clearly must be inspired by Labyrinth. But then I was like, well, why the hell is he an owl in Labyrinth? Like, they didn't just pull that out of nowhere. It's not, I don't believe Jim Henson one day was like, what if? And so there was a night that I did hours of research trying to figure out where the terminology of the Owl King had come from. And I'm glad I did that because when I started writing it, it was like a really generic Labyrinth poem. I was like, oh, it's a dark fairy and they're in love. And so that poem was supposed to be more through the lens of this is really tragic. Because Mara and I talk about that all the time where I was like, oh, if you look at his face during the song Within You, it's like so sad that she is leaving and doesn't love him back. Because we're problematic and we ship Sareth. But yeah, that one's my favorite. And then out of Mars drawings, I really love the first drawing for Into the Woods. And I really like the drawing for Lively. And what was the other one I really liked?
I like the ones at the beginning as well.
Yeah, and then I really love the Isabella drawing so much. It's currently my phone background. Like, I just think it's so beautiful. And I love the Neil Gaiman one because the colors, it's like one of the most vivid drawings in the book. Mara, what about you?
Yeah, I think there was something that Victoria Shaw said that she knew she had written a good book the minute that she could like pick it up again and like read it and be surprised for the first time. And that's what's been like also going on. Like every time I look at the illustrations and I read the poems, it's just I find something new and I enjoy it all the time and I am amazed by the work. So right now, yeah, my favorite one is The Path That Leads to the End. And as for illustrations, just for like hard work, I guess it's the one that is like it accompanies it, and the one that for the Owl King. But also like the Neil Gaiman one, because I was just like, okay, what do I want to add here? And also because he's like the only man in the book, right? Yeah. I wanted everyone else to be like gender bend or a woman, and it's just, well, like we have some deities, in the Owl King.
Yeah. I also liked Our Tragedy and that illustration. That was because that poem is from the point of view of Marley from Lazarus, who is the character played by Light of My Life, Sophia Ann Caruso. And and I think she's a fascinating character in that musical. And then I love the intro poem, and that's another one that I rewrote like 4 or 5 times because I was like, I knew I wanted to write a poem called Into the Woods that literally the entire point of the poem was to set it up. It wasn't gonna like be about any character told from
Did
the
you
point
write
of view.
that last or?
It was one of the last ones I wrote. I think the last one I wrote was the Neil Gaiman one. Because that was the last idea we had, was to put Neil Gaiman in. But Into the Woods, I kept rewriting. It was one of the last ones. Like Owl King, the Neil Gaiman one and Into the Woods were last. Because I started Into the Woods and I was like, this is stupid. I was like, this is cliche. And then when I looked up the quote, the Rumi quote, it starts with out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field, I'll meet you there. And because originally I was going off the idea of the Into the Woods lyric that's like into the woods and out of the woods and home before dark, but we weren't trying to have a like home before dark ending. So that's when I remembered the like urban legend conspiracy stories about staircases in the woods, and like you should never go up staircases in the woods because of like they could lead to other places. And I was like, I would for sure go up a staircase. And so I was kind of going for like I don't know if you guys like Bridget, do you remember in the series of Unfortunate Events how they would always start with a letter from Lemony Snicket that don't read the book? So I was kind of going for this idea of like, oh, these woods are so dangerous, like don't go in, wink wink, because the world says like you shouldn't go in. And obviously we're like inviting you to come in, but that's why the poem literally has the line, you know, they say if you find a staircase in the woods you should never climb it. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think people who don't read poetry and don't understand it, they think like you just sit down and like you just crank out a poem, and like sometimes poems come really naturally, and other times like I will spend just days looking for like so many explicit things. And so like I started writing that poem in April and I didn't finish it till right before we were done because I kept doing it. And I know Mar, like there was like a lot of drawings like Mar started like
they're like the first drafts, I think, were the last drawings that I finished, like the colors and all of that. It's just some others came more naturally, right? I mean, others I had to redo. And for this draft, I was like, okay, they're not ready yet, or I'm not ready yet to like finish them. So
because I know the path that leads to the end drawing was one of the first things we talked about, because that was one of the first poems I wrote, the path that leads to the end. It might have been the absolute first one because I was like, oh, I have an idea, because it's one of the Starless Sea poems. And so I wrote that one really quick and then sent it to Mar, and she was like, here's my idea for what can go with it. And it's a scene from the Starless Sea. And so that was one of the, it's funny because like, I'd say the poem that took me, like I finished last, was Into the Woods, but that drawing Mar had like finished pretty quick. And then I wrote the path that leads to the end really quick. And one of the last drawings that Mar finished was that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like the Owl King one was literally like, okay, what else do I have to do now? Because it was
the Owl King was just a challenge all around. I remember Mar was like, what is what drawings do we still need? And I was like, the Owl King is the only one we don't have. And she was like, oh, right. And yeah, it was the Owl King poem and drawing were just, and I love the drawing for that too, because it's like Labyrinth, but like so many layers. Because whenever you look up like the Labyrinth movie posters, it's like David Bowie is huge and like Sarah's like really small. So I like that it's like this blend of both of them in the ballroom scene. Yeah. But yeah, it was a mix of things came really quickly and other things didn't. Like I'm trying to think of one where we both did it really fast, and I'm blanking now. Well, because I know you did the Beautiful Beast picture, and then the next day I was like, here's a poem that goes with it.
Yeah, I think the Hello Sisters were the fastest ones because we just had them already. Like we had a draft very quick.
Well, I remember like we had so many instances where Mara was like, what color dress is Iris wearing? And I went and got the book. And then, you were like, what is Eleanor dressed like in this scene? And I had to go get the book. And I was like, it says she's wearing a red headband. But yeah, I think the Eleanor one came pretty easily, not Never Eleanor.
Oh yeah, like that one, like I already had the idea. Like obviously it had to be like on the ship and all of that.
Yeah, we made a list and we were like, okay, the women from the Starless Sea, like Eleanor and Mirabelle, have to be in there. That's like obviously because the women from the Starless Sea are just so wonderful. But yeah, I'd say the Hollow Sisters, the three Hollow Sisters. So that's Fia, Claw, Lively, and Beautiful Beast were really easy because we'd also just read the book. Like we had just finished it.
Yeah.
So we were like really in it. Like one time, like Mar sent me a playlist she'd made that was called like Gray's Apartment because it's one of the characters in the book. And then the next day I sent a playlist called Get Lost in the Woods. We make a lot of playlists. So and then I made a playlist called Thomas Newton's Apartment because he's the main character in Lazarus. And so we were like, playing that one night. And so we would just like be blaring these long, never-ending playlists to figure it out. But
if you could choose one myth that you didn't get the chance to write about, which one would it be? Did you like have any that you may have done it, but then you were like, nah, it doesn't fit, or like that?
Let me think. I mean, there was Mar and I have like two aesthetics. We have cottagecore and extreme gothic fiction. Like so it's like gothic manor or it's cottagecore in the woods. And so the next book is all gothic fiction themed, and it's obviously going to contain all our gothic stories. So like Beetlejuice, I always have like a million Beetlejuice ideas, and obviously there's no way in hell that works in this setting. We both rewatched Crimson Peak the other night, and that's a movie that's very like we're like and just vampire stuff. As you both know, I love vampires, and Carmilla is I think just like one of the, and like Twilight. So yeah, there was definitely things that are fantasy that we love that would not fit in like a fictional forest world. There were the things I thought we'd never figure out a way to include, like the secret history. I did not think we'd work that in because it's a dark academia book. But we got it in there. But like, yeah, all the gothic things we like Phantom of the Opera and Beetlejuice and
I would say also, like I just have like myths like the 4 branches of the Mabinogi, like Welsh mythology or stuff like that I would like to include, but it's also like either or too dark or
I remember at one point
to be gothic. So it's just
I remember at one point I said, does Hades and Persephone work for this? And it was like, no, it doesn't, because that's the underworld. And then I also said that again when we were working on the gothic book, and it's just like, no, Hades and Persephone it's too clean cut, and it's too close to other things like Labyrinth and like Beauty and the Beast and Beetlejuice that are just like more nuanced versions of that story. And it's also just like it's done a lot. And so that was the thing with like when we were doing the Labyrinth pieces, is Labyrinth is arguably done a lot now, more so than it used to be. And so we were trying really hard to make the Labyrinth pieces not be the way everyone does them.
You know, I was thinking just because I got a tarot from The Last Unicorn, and I also know I can't fit that in anywhere. It's not like too dark or too weird, and it's like no, but it's not enough like to be a gothic fiction either. So it's just
like I know we like the Caraval. I mean, like, there's just a lot of Neil Gaiman stories that we weren't going to work in. Like, we like the ocean at the end of the lane, but, like, that's not going to work. And we like the Caraval trilogy as, like, trashy as it is. Like, but, again, like, that, it's like a carnival. It's not going to work. When we made the vibes, we were like, what can fit, what can't fit this aesthetic. So, yeah, there were all the weird gothic stuff, and then, like, the old myths. Like there's nothing mermaid in here, and I love me a mermaid. But
it might just be too much, you know.
There's too many things going on.
Yeah. Nice. So I have a fun forest themed question.
Nice.
So since it takes place in a magical forest, if you were to get stuck in a magical forest, what are 3 things you would want to take with you?
Let me think.
And if anyone has any questions, I'll give you time to think. But if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask Molly and Mar, please put them in the comments.
Very specific, or it could be like something as big as like, oh, I'll take my bag or something. Like,
I would want a book to identify mushrooms and plants so that I didn't ingest anything poisonous. Because obviously I'd be trying to eat in there.
Yeah.
I'd want. Let me think. This is hard.
I don't know, like practical, I guess. Yeah, I'll take a weapon, like either my I have a bow and arrow, so if I can take that.
Oh yeah, I'll go grab mine too. You have a plastic sword. I'll bring it.
So I guess I'll take that, and I don't know, probably a jacket.
I'll bring like a blanket, a book to identify like plants and mushrooms, and then yeah, I'd bring a sword just to in case encounter. But you know what? I would bring instead of a blanket, I would bring instead of a sword, so a blanket, the book, and then like necklace of rowan berries, so that like if the fae are there, because like they don't, you know what I mean? Like the fae don't fuck with rowan berries. They don't fuck with salt and rowan berries, but instead of having to like just constantly put salt on everything, just wear a thing of rowan berries. And
I guess, yeah, a cloak, a bow, and I don't know, just a bag so I can carry stuff in there or like collect stuff in there.
Yeah, just like a
Well,
bag.
like shouldn't have a bag.
I don't need a bag. I'm good. You know what? Instead of a blanket, I'll bring like a really big jacket with a lot of pockets.
Yeah, the pockets are a must.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice. Let's see. What were some of the, you kind of mentioned before, but like what were some of the titles that you went through for this book? Because I think Not a Myth is a really great title for it, and I think it encapsulates a lot of the ideas. But did you have like a list of other versions that you wanted to go through first?
Yeah.
Like end up hold on, let me find it.
Definitely.
I'm looking at the notes here because so Rabbit Holes was a title idea. No One Ever Believes Us. That was too long. So We're Quite Fond of You as Well was another long title. You Are Not a Myth was actually the original. Was You Are Not a Myth, and then Mar was like, "Can we shorten this so that it fits on the cover better?" Since Mar designed the cover, and that's what we said, Not a Myth. Dream Me Here. We also had a lot of the quote this begins with is from Caravan of Lies, and it's, "Am I magic enough for you, my love? Am I real?" Other quotes we considered were, "We're quite fond of you as well," from the Starless Sea. "We're all stardust and stories," from the Starless Sea. "We're all mad here," Curiouser and Curiouser. We were like, those are way too basic. We had like a really long idea of doing this bit from Lazarus where it's, "If I can't go on, you'll have to help me. So what is it you want? To be back in the stars? Then that's where we'll go." And then "The world is wide and the road will take us anywhere. Be wise, be brave, be tricky," from Coraline we got really close to picking that. "Wait for the signal and I'll meet you after dark," from the song Willow by Taylor Swift.
Nice.
Yeah, we went through a lot of like.
How did you guys come to this one? Like, was there a debate? Did one of you like it more? Like,
I really wanted be wise, be brave, be tricky, like hardcore. I wanted that, and Mar was like, "That's not quite right." And then Mar was like, "What?" I, as a joke, was like a Caravan of Lies quote. And then Mar was like, "Honestly, yeah." And so I got out the scripts again, and I said, "Well, it should be something Isabella says," because she's like, I think, the most like cottagecore character. And so then we just went through the script like page by page, and I was going through things Isabella said, and we settled on, "Am I magic enough for you, my love? Am I real?" Since the idea is this is not a myth. And so like it was between that and Isabella saying, "What are we if not the stuff of myth?" But that was like too close to the title. So we settled on the "Am I magic enough for you, my love? Am I real?" And then I really wanted the end quote also, which I won't say what it is. I wanted the end quote really bad because I thought that'd be nice if we began and ended with a quote. And I thought that was a specific enough quote from the Starless Sea to put at the end.
Yeah, and I think like the title is really important because there's always like people reacting to this type of stories, like, "Oh, it's just a dream. She dreamt it, whatever. She was drugged or whatever," you know? Like it's always like diminishing the stories and the fantasy worlds, and like it's just also like believing in something special, right? Like something out there. Like I always put it like this, that sometimes I go into the forest, and if there's like a tiny archway, I'll like just count to 3 and breathe in and like cross and just expecting to see something else. And I hope that like this book can give you that feeling of like just count to 3 and climb up the stair or cross the door or whatever, but you'll find something. And just believe in it. And it's just all these characters, all these things like tell you something really important of cherishing certain like sensations and moments, and it's just like, okay, believe in it, right? Like trust in it for once. And yeah.
Mar and I always talk about how we hate that in portal fantasy stories, specifically when the main character is a girl, so like Alice in Wonderland and the Hazelwood and things like that. If the main character is a girl, like Peter Pan, like they don't get to stay. It's always like, oh, like they have to go back. Like the end of the Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, like the end of the Alice in Wonderland movie, Tim Burton movie. Like I love that movie, but at the end when the Mad Hatter's like, you could stay, and she's like, no, I have to. It's like, why? Your life sucked. Like, what's the point? Yeah. And like Dorothy has to leave Oz, kind of thing. But then when the main character is a man, like in the Starless Sea or Neverwhere, they get to stay, and it's like, oh, that's where they were meant to be. And it's like, okay, well, what the hell? Then why don't the women get to stay?
Yeah.
So, and then like, again, like with like Labyrinth, there's always the people that argue it was all just Sarah's dream, which is so dumb. And the same thing with Alice in Wonderland. People argue she just had a dream. And Dorothy, like when they made the movie Wizard of Oz, they literally changed the book's ending to it was all a dream. The Nutcracker will often do that. It was all a dream. And like Mark said, that just like, it kills the entire point of the story that this writer created.
Yeah.
He spent all this time to build this world. Like nobody's gonna like do a high fantasy story and then be like, Game of Thrones was all Daenerys's dream. Like, and so Harry Potter all
stayed in the Shire, you know, like
Harry is still in that cupboard. Like Percy never went to camp. Like it's so dumb. And so we wanted this.
It's not just forcing them back into the original.
Yeah, and it's
like they've changed and grown.
I like the idea of like the Wayward Children series by Sean McGuire talks about like some people are born into the wrong world. Like you're supposed to go find where you belong and where you make sense. And it's like, you know, in Alice in Wonderland, especially in the movie, it's like you're a champion that we've prophesized and we've been waiting for, and she saves this entire country. And then she's like, okay, gotta go back to this dumbass party. It's like, why though? So the point is like, we wanted this to be very much like you go and you stay because it's where you feel like you belong. And so the idea is like not a myth, because the idea is like these things aren't just dreams. They aren't just this like Neil Gaiman says, stories may well be lies, but they're beautiful lies that sometimes tell the truth. And so that's why Mar was really adamant that the title be not a myth and not anything else. And I'm glad that we went with that.
Nice. Yeah. So you guys kind of talked about before, but you're talking about, I was going to ask if you have any plans for future collaborations, but you mentioned that you're going to do this Gothic book. Do you want to talk about a bit about that? Tell us.
Yeah, so we've because we're now going to lean into our completely opposite aesthetic of Gothic fiction, and it's going to come out around Halloween. We don't have a title yet because we come up with the title last, but we've made a list, and there's going to be a lot of inspirations, but Beetlejuice, Beauty and the Beast, the works of the Bronte sisters, Crimson Peak, and then also there's like songs like The Unwanted Animal by
Amazing.
Devil, The Last Great American Dynasty by Taylor Swift. Also, Mar wants to like the old gods. You explained you wanted to.
I wanted to use like old gods, because like it's stuff like it's forgotten or it's been like, you know, suppressed, and I think it's very important. And like I don't mean Hellenistic gods or anything like that. I mean like Celtic gods, or maybe like from here, like Aztec gods or stuff.
Mar obviously is Mexican and in Mexico, and Mar wants to lean into Mexican Gothic fiction, like which I haven't read, so I've checked out a lot of books from the library. Obviously Crimson Peak, we like rewatched that the other day, and then the next day when we were working on it, I was like, okay, I've got like 8 ideas for poems for Crimson Peak. But yeah, we have a really, really long list of all this stuff.
Longer than this?
No, definitely.
For sure. We have a lot of ideas. So the way that this takes place in a forest, the next one takes place in a house, like kind of, because you know, Gothic fiction's when a woman gets a house. Yeah. So There's going to be a lot of different vampire stories that show up. But yeah, Mara and I either want to live in a cottage in the woods or just be a gothic leading lady in a castle somewhere.
Both great options.
I said to
If you had
Mara,
to choose one of the two, which would it be?
I would want to be a gothic leading lady if I had to choose one or the other.
I mean, I guess I would like to live in the cottage, but
Split.
it's either that or be a creature. Because like I wouldn't want to be the gothic leading lady. I would like to be a creature.
No, I want to be like that reactionary person, like, you know, the Lydia Deetz, the Edith. The thing is, I think I'd handle it better than some of these ladies are.
I got it.
Like Jane Eyre, get it together, my God. Well, like when I read the original Beauty and the Beast, Beauty is dumb. Oh my God. I'm like, come on, connect the pieces here. The same thing, like when we rewatched Crimson Peak, I was saying to Mara, I was like, I would not be doing this. I would not be doing that. Let me right here, this would be the choice I would make. Yeah, there's also like the air of mysteriousness in the Gothic castle. I think that makes sense for me and Mar, though, that Mar picks the cottage and I pick the castle.
Checks out.
Yeah, so the idea of the next book is kind of another concept piece about like this giant Gothic mansion and all the different things we're gonna work on. So yeah, it'll probably be longer than this one.
And around Halloween, you're thinking?
Yeah, Halloween, that's the goal. So we've already started.
Mm-hmm.
I said to Mara, I was like, okay, but like, can we have Beetlejuice stuff in here? And Mara was like, yeah, definitely. So
Mara was just like, no.
I would have been like, hey, I mean, like if Mara had been like, that's too modern, that's not gonna work. Yeah, so I've already started a poem that's based on a Beetlejuice song.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm excited. We were like getting so like geeking out. We were just like showing each other editions of Jane Eyre. We were like, and I have this one. Like, who cares? I think that's helpful, but that's what we're doing. Like,
do you guys have any plans for anything like past that? I know like you're still working on this one, but like, do you want to do another one? Like,
yeah, no, I would keep doing it. But all we've thought about right now is
this one.
I think it's step by step.
Yeah.
I can definitely see us in the future doing a piece that is like an epic that just does one story. Like we pick one myth and retell the whole myth really long. We come out here, we do we do the Odyssey, but we're like women. Like
women, okay.
We love to take men's stories and make them about women. Just recast. Yeah, we just
but Sapphic, Hades, and Persephone.
We just could be. Yeah,
no, we do. Again, we do.
We do the whole Arthur myth again.
We pull a Madeline Miller and we pick some bitch from Greek mythology that's met one time, and we're like, okay,
this person.
I'm such a like trash for Greek mythology. Whenever they're like, it's about the women now, I'm like, do it.
Yeah.
Or like, yeah, like the Celtic myths and the Scottish myth. We do a Highlander piece. We're both really into Outlander, and we're just like, we're going to rewrite Outlander.
Outlander. And
we're like, Diana, this is what you should have done. We're just
okay. So like, I saw what you did, but I'm going to do it better.
Again, but better. I'm out.
Don't mind.
Because we're better together.
Thinking the big thoughts.
Yeah. Now, if anyone has any questions, ask now. But otherwise, I'm going to just say, do you guys want to promote anything else about yourselves? Any last thoughts and everything?
Mars open for commissions.
On talk about that?
Yeah, like just check my Instagram, Mars Cottage of Dreams. I'm open for commissions, or on Fiverr, it's the same thing. I have the link in my Instagram, so they can check it out.
I have a Wattpad novel that updates weekly called Guinevere Allen and the Wisteria Door. The most recent chapter's up. I could read a poem for us before we go and show the picture. Okay.
Or Mark can show the picture while you read the poem.
Okay, so I was going to read Lively.
Okay, let's go.
So, because I love that picture too.
Got it.
Okay. So that's the picture. So, Lively. Buzz cut, hair bleached, nothing makes any sense anymore. It never did. There's a garden inside me. It's rotting, putrid, rancid. It's all make-believe, just a story we tell our little sister. We sewed the world up with thread and called ourselves perfect, complete, human. We are bones and blood, Our throats hold siren song, our touch sticks like honey. Our prey can never wash themselves of us. Once we've touched, we stain. I think someone hurt us once, made us moon-shaped, made us scared. Sometimes I remember naked limbs shaking on cobblestone streets, and I wonder what made us. What are we made of? Fairy tales, gardens, nightmares.
Yay! I love it. Do you guys have anything else you want to say before we head out?
I think that's it. It's available on Amazon.
Description.
An ebook. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it is free. And yeah, follow our Instagrams at Magical Molly and Bridget and Mars College of Dreams will keep you updated on the next book. And in a few hours on this channel, we're reading Antony and Cleopatra. And Mars is playing Cleopatra. A lot of us are going to be wearing sheets for our costumes. It's going to be amazing.
So everyone go check out Not a Myth if you haven't already. If not, I hope you enjoyed. And thanks for coming to this video. And I hope we see you at Antony and Cleopatra.
See you in a few hours, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.